Rule 7. Work as hard as you possibly can on at least one thing and see what happens. It cuts down the amount of other options you could be overwhelmed by that would otherwise lead to uncertainty, anxiety, shame, and other nasty things that just make life more difficult than it needs to be. Working hard at one thing is valuable because a unity emerges. The unity constitutes what you could be. It's also a unity that transcends the discipline rules that you follow. A transformation occurs, and that ripples out into the larger world. It's as if there is a higher thing than the reason the rules exist in the first place, and that thing can't be realized until you follow the rules that you set out for yourself. Disciplining yourself towards one thing imitates the highest ideal, which as expressed by Christ is something singular. You've probably heard sayings like one Lord and all thy heart, and in Eastern spirituality terms like oneness and the Supreme. So if you're young and you have no idea what to do in your life, at least set a specific goal for yourself to discover what you want. Perhaps you commit 6 months to learning to play golf. If you don't want to do that, at least decide on committing to something. Peterson says, the worst decision of all is none. Some other great lessons are that very often, failure is a consequence of insufficient single-mindedness, elaborate but pointless rationalization, and rejection of responsibility. Proper discipline organizes rather than destroys. It's a misconception that disciplining your child is permanently repressing your child's will. And Peterson observed students doing a 5 to 6 year program that progressively got more difficult and had them dramatically improve their skills, discipline, and sense of purpose. Rule 8. Try to make one room in your home as beautiful as possible. Something as simple as a painting on the wall that hits home for you can do wonders. Beauty reminds us of the ultimate. Art is also beneficial in our communities. When artists spice up a local town, visitors come, crime goes down, the economy goes up, people start living there. Peterson says we need to stop thinking about art as just an option or a luxury. I've experienced the joy and beauty firsthand. In fact, on my daily walks, I see this beautiful expression of creativity on this Stoby pole. It makes me happy, and there's even more around the local community. Gurdjieff, an eccentric Russian philosopher and mystic from the early 1900s, used to say that there are two kinds of art. Subjective art is created for personal reasons and without the intention of anybody seeing it. Picasso is an example. The Indian mystic Osho mentioned how he would have gone mad if he didn't paint, and so that's why he painted. Stare at his paintings long enough and you might just go mad yourself. Objective art, on the other hand, is art born from meditation, an expression of the divine. The ancient Aztec Teotl art is one such example. It can stimulate the divine within you. Like many things relating to consciousness and history, the Aztecs are fascinating and documentaries are a pleasure to learn from. But sometimes you'll do a search for, say, Aztec documentary, and you'll see a search result that says something cool like Aztec Pyramids of War. So you click on it, go to the website, only to realize you can't watch it because lo and behold, this video is currently unavailable to watch in your location. So go somewhere else. But not so fast, because NordVPN is here to save the day. A big thank you to them for making this video possible. NordVPN is an app you can install on your computer or mobile device that will allow you to connect to websites as if you're in a different country. So in most cases, you're able to avoid issues like this. Another way I've been using NordVPN is on the Osho website. Often I'll do a search of a topic I'm interested in and end the search with Osho. The Osho website will come up, but when I go to the site, I can only flick through, say, 3 or 4 pages of his words before the site says I have to sign up for an account to continue reading. And often I only need to read one more page, so it becomes tedious. Sometimes the site is buggy and logging in can be a pain, so if NordVPN isn't already connected, I just open it and click a country to connect to, and boom. Within a matter of seconds, I'm now able to continue reading on the Osho site. This works for other sites too, even for YouTube videos that your country might block you from watching. NordVPN will also encrypt your connection so your data and internet activity is kept private and secure. I've been a happy customer of NordVPN for over 3.5 years and I highly recommend it. So go to nordvpn.com/1%better to get a 2-year plan plus 4 additional months with a huge discount. Now back to the video. Rule 9. If old memories still upset you, write them down carefully and completely. Peterson emphasizes that it is our destiny to transform chaos into order. If you still have memories that upset you, then you are carrying a burden that continues to affect your life, often in ways that you may be blind to. Just one lie, one act of avoidance, one unaddressed old memory can and will grow into something worse. Writing old memories down can help you get clear on precisely what bothers you about the memory. It may also reveal false interpretations of the memory. Peterson shares a story of a boy who was told by his parents that adults were angels, so throughout his life when he was abused by other adults, he thought the abuse was acceptable and never questioned it. Peterson asked him to write down his experiences and read them out over a number of counseling sessions. His psychotic symptoms diminished. So if old memories still upset you, write them down carefully and completely. Rule 10. Plan and work diligently to maintain the romance in your relationship. Peterson says, why would you possibly assume that something as complex as maintaining a marriage could be managed without commitment, practice, and effort? Success is going to depend on your ability to negotiate. To negotiate, you and the person you are negotiating with must first know what you each need and want, and second, be willing to discuss things straightforwardly. In a relationship, you can rule over the person, be a slave to the other person, or you can negotiate. It's Peterson's view that whilst negotiation can be tough, it's the least worst of the three. Negotiate everything. Running a household is like running a full-time business. You need to ask these questions. Who does the dishes? Who dries the dishes? Who puts them away? When? And what about making the bed? How should the bed be made? How often? What if your partner sucks at making the bed? These are problems that recur for days, weeks, months, years, your entire life if they aren't discussed and negotiated. Unaddressed issues will show up as cold shoulders, arguments, bickering, and all sorts of childish nonsense that eats away at you, your partner, and your relationship. It's Peterson's 30 years of personal and clinical experience that says you should speak to your partner for 90 minutes a week about practical and personal matters. If there's one thing to remember about keeping the peace long-term with your partner, then always speak the truth. Now moving on to romance. Peterson has seen in his clinical practice that most couples manage to have sex once or twice a week. Twice is better than once, but once is much better than zero. Zero is bad. Something has to give, and that can turn into an affair. It's the harsh truth. It's not easy to keep the spark alive. Living such a busy life, it may not be comfortable negotiating with your partner when to have sex. That can take the zest and spontaneity out of things, and there's a lot more to manage amongst your busy life. So do your best, because the spark doesn't stay alive without continual effort. Also remember that you've made a commitment to this relationship. Entertaining the idea of escape is really avoidance of responsibility. The dissatisfaction of always looking for another option causes misery, perhaps more than the challenges of putting in a sincere effort to keep things together, even when it sucks. Rule 11. Do not allow yourself to become resentful, deceitful, or arrogant. Resentful people are resentful because the absolute unknown and its terrors, nature seems to be against you, the powerful manipulative force of culture, and the evil within yourself and others. Peterson shares a story of how he constantly saw people who were feeling resentful towards life. They had their reasons: divorce, death of loved ones, seeing the evil in people and whatnot. So he would say to clients, "Let us take your problems apart. Even though many of them are real, we will try to figure out which ones are your fault, because some of them are going to be. Some of them, alternatively, are just the catastrophes of life. We will delineate that very carefully. Then we will start having you practice overcoming whatever it is that you are bringing to the situation that is making it worse. We will start to make some strategic plans about how you might confront the parts of your life that are truly just tragic, and we'll get you to do that in a truthful, open, and courageous manner. Then we will watch what happens." People got better from this. So now let's explore deceit and arrogance. Arrogance enables deceit. One form of arrogance is motivated by the idea that taking part in the lie will be better than pursuing the truth. Otherwise, why would you lie? Another form of arrogance is the belief that deceitful action will stand on its own, without being shattered by reality. And lastly, arrogance is a warped sense of justice. I deserve things because the world is unfair to me. Constantly engaging deceit can lead to a feedback loop of engaging in more and more, just like an addiction. Peterson assures us that the right attitude to the horror of existence, the alternative to resentment, deceit, and arrogance, is the assumption that there is enough of you, society, and the world to justify existence. That said, moving on to the final rule, be grateful in spite of your suffering. I remember when my mum died. She was in a hospital bed. My family and I gathered around, not saying much. This was a strange sight. I didn't know what to feel, but there was a silent and somber atmosphere in the room. I guess this is it. That's what I said to myself, but not really believing that it's actually happening. I remember giving Mum a hug on the hospital bed. She could barely move, her voice wasn't working anymore, and there was just a gurgling of sounds that barely resembled English. There was an icky liquid spilling out of her mouth because of the cancer. It wasn't the most beautiful sight to see. And so I walked out alongside my brothers and sisters knowing that that was the last time I'd see my mum again. So none of us talked about it all that much. And during that time, I was in the middle of an existential crisis, so I wasn't really feeling anything and everything was meaningless at the time. But sure enough, I began having disturbing dreams. Dreams where Mum came alive again and she was back home with me, but alive and suffering severely from cancer. Then I wake up and realize it was all a dream, and that Mum really is dead. She's gone. Either way, a mum alive and suffering or a mum dead were both equally disturbing realities. So I went through the natural process of grief over the years, pockets of pain in the form of dreams and waking tears on random days. So here's some things Peterson has to say about being grateful in spite of tragedies such as these. Human beings have the capacity to courageously confront their suffering, to transcend it psychologically, as well as to ameliorate it practically. Peterson also says, I do not believe you can be appropriately grateful or thankful for what good you have, and for what evil has not befallen you, until you have some profound and even terrifying sense of the weight of existence. So, in the case of my mum passing away, it gives me more to be grateful for, especially the people in my family and my friends that are alive. Peterson says another interesting thing about how we view the death of another. So what Peterson has found is that often the person on the deathbed will, ask that you don't suffer. They hope that you don't suffer because they're gone. So in Peterson's words, he says, to collapse in the aftermath of a tragic loss is therefore more accurately a betrayal of the person who has died instead of a tribute, as it multiplies the effect of that mortal catastrophe. Next, there is a deep part of us that makes the decision, when we grieve for someone we have lost, that their existence was worthwhile despite it all. Otherwise, why grieve? So life is worth it, including the fact that death is inevitable. And you might love people despite their limitations, but you also love them because of their limitations. That is something very much worth understanding. Doing so may help you see how gratitude remains possible in trying times. Let's recap. In today's video, you learned Rule 7, work as hard as you possibly can on at least one thing and see what happens. Rule 8, try to make one room in your home as beautiful as possible. Rule 9, if old memories still upset you, write them down carefully and completely. Rule 10, plan and work diligently to maintain the romance in your relationship. Rule 11, do not allow yourself to become resentful, deceitful, or arrogant. And Rule 12, be grateful in spite of your suffering.